Good morning. Welcome to Lesson 70, Course in Miracles students, seekers of salvation, students of life. Lesson 70, my salvation comes from me. All temptation, not just some temptations that you feel guilty about, all temptation is nothing more than some form of the basic temptation not to believe the idea for today. My salvation comes from me. Salvation seems to come from anywhere except from you. So too does the source of guilt. You see neither guilt nor salvation as in your own mind and nowhere else. That's because we're so preoccupied. The mind is so preoccupied with consciousness, with the conscious content, all those thoughts that just go blah, blah, blah all through the day. We don't believe there's anything else in our mind. How can there possibly be anything else? I look around in there and I can't even find where my thoughts come from. How can there possibly be anything else? Even Einstein said we only use about 6% of our brain, right? So, and the brain obviously has the functionality for the physical nature of life and all of that sort of stuff, which nobody understands, including me. But the levels of the mind, we have consciousness and then subconsciousness, and then the miracle level below that, and then right above we have higher conscious or super consciousness or God conscious, whatever you like. So there are these layers, and allowing yourself to be still and to go down and back or to forward and ahead, whatever, as that feeling, as we had in lesson 69 before. When you still the mind, it will automatically, right? When you still your mind, when you do that, have that meditative moment, it will automatically go where it needs to go. Don't examine it, just let it happen. Right? It's like changing the channel on a television set, and all of a sudden you'll be aware of your conscious mind, which is still, and then something else, whoosh. You see neither guilt nor salvation as in your own mind and nowhere else. When you realize that all guilt is solely an invention of your mind, you must also realize that guilt and salvation must be in the same place. Understanding this, you are saved. This is a journey into fear. The seeming cost of accepting today's idea is this. It means that nothing outside yourself can save you. Nothing outside yourself can give you peace. But it also means that nothing outside yourself can hurt you or disturb your peace or upset you in any way. Whew. Today's idea places you in charge of the universe where you belong because of who you are. This is not a role which can be partially accepted, and you must surely begin to see that accepting it is salvation. It may not, however, be clear to you why the recognition that guilt is in your own mind entails the realization that salvation is there as well. God would not have put the remedy for sickness where it cannot help. God would not have put the remedy for sickness where it cannot help. That is the way your mind has worked, but hardly his. He wants you to be healed, and so he has kept the source of healing where the need for healing lies. You have tried to do just the opposite, making every attempt, however distorted and fantastic it might be, to separate healing from the sickness for which it was intended, and thus keep the sickness. Right? It's like we were saying before. You want to be sick. You want to be sad. You want to be upset. It's like, holy cow, I'm crazy. The realization that you want the guilt, it's like, oh man, well, I'm doing this to myself. Your purpose was to ensure that healing did not occur. Whoa. Your purpose was to ensure that healing did not occur. God's purpose was to ensure that it did. Today we practice realizing that God's will and ours are really the same in this. God wants us to be healed, and we do not really want to be sick because it makes us unhappy. Therefore, in accepting the idea for today, we are in agreement with God. He does not want us to be sick, neither do we. He wants us to be healed, so do we. Okay, we can choose again. We are ready for 2 longer practice periods today, each of which should last some 10 to 15 minutes. We will, however, still let you decide when to undertake them. We will follow this practice for a number of lessons, and it would again be well to decide in advance when would be a good time to lay aside for each of them, and adhere to your own decision as closely as possible. Begin these practice periods by repeating the idea for today, adding a statement signifying your recognition that salvation comes from nothing outside of you. You might put it this way: my salvation comes from me. It cannot come from anywhere else. Then devote a few minutes with your eyes closed to reviewing some of the external places where you have looked for salvation in the past, in other people, in possessions, in various situations and events, and in self-concepts which you sought to make real. Recognize that it was not there. Tell yourself, my salvation cannot come from any of these things. My salvation comes from me and only from me. Now we will try again to reach the light in you, which is where your salvation is. You cannot find it in the clouds that surround the light, and it is in them you have been looking for it. It is not there. It is past the clouds and in the light beyond. Remember that you will have to go through the clouds before you can reach the light. But remember also that you have never found anything in the cloud patterns you imagined that endured or that you wanted. Since all illusions and salvation have failed you, since all illusions of salvation have failed you, surely you do not want to remain in the clouds looking vainly for idols there, when you could so easily walk on into the light of real salvation. Try to pass the clouds by whatever means appeals to you. If it helps you, think of me holding your hand and leading you, and I assure you this will be no idle fantasy. For the short and frequent practice periods today, remind yourself that your salvation comes from you, and nothing but your own thoughts can hamper your progress. You are free from all external interference. You are in charge of your salvation. You are in charge of the salvation of the world. Say then, my salvation comes from me. Nothing outside of me can hold me back. Within me is the world's salvation and my own. Wow. Lesson 71 tomorrow. All right, that was a good one. I love you. I love you. Just remember that in those meditative efforts, it's important to still the mind. And for me personally, I remember lesson 10, my thoughts do not mean anything. I would actually apply that lesson. That was one of my favorite lessons, probably my favorite lesson, lesson 10. I would actually do lesson 10 if I was attempting to sit and meditate and to go through those clouds. I would first do lesson 10. Didn't matter what lesson for the day I was on, but I would do lesson 10, and just to bring my mind into the here and the now, where my thoughts don't mean anything, because it's amazing how much within the period of doing these lessons, when you go to bed and then you wake up in the morning and the mind chatter is just right back there. And lesson 10 within me resonated in such a way that it would bring me back into an alignment, I guess. And maybe you've got your own lesson that you prefer for that, or that you really gel with for that. And then I would do my meditation. It's nice when there are no clouds. All right, finger on my nose. I love me. I love you. Take it easy. See you tomorrow.